That's why our government is launching a new $2.3 billion electric vehicle affordability program.
It's back. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today, Mark Carney announcing his new EV mandate, which is not the old EV mandate. It's a different type of EV system here because EVs are not popular in Canada, but he needs them to be. Let's jump into this. Mark Carney here today announcing his new plan for EVs when Canadians can't afford food. That's his priority, is EVs. You know, that sector of the auto industry that is dwindling in support in our country.
You see some of the innovation here. We know that the global auto sector has been radically transformed. Rapid shifts towards lower emissions, towards greater connectivity, towards even more advanced manufacturing. So the decisions that Canada makes now will shape careers, communities, and our economies for decades to come. And we will not miss this opportunity.
Yeah, he doesn't want to miss this opportunity. As you're going to see here, this is just deplorable what he's doing. This is just for him and his buddies to make money. Canadians don't want EVs. It's a very small sector of our market and it's going down. It's not going up. So looking at the EV market here in Canada, this is what we've got. So this is overlaid with two different graphs here. The blue one is S&P Global Data and StatsCan is the red. So they're basically the same. And this is the slow rise of EVs, ZEVs, as a percentage of new vehicle registrations and ZEVs, zero emissions vehicles. This is a share of total light duty vehicle sales. And you're seeing a big spike here. Why is that? Because this program ended in January 2025. Justin Trudeau, his entire kingdom was crumbling. They didn't put any more money into this. They prorogued the government and then it went away. And what happened? Well, people bought a bunch of them before the program ran out to get basically subsidized cheaper vehicles. This is costing taxpayers money for other people to buy vehicles, EVs, which is ridiculous. And you'll note too, this went up to 18%. This is 18% of light duty vehicle sales, not total vehicle sales, because when you add in total vehicle sales, it's much lower. Right on the government's own website, while zero emission vehicles grow sharply, as they put it here, zero emission vehicles, which include BEVs, PHEVs, represented 2.8% of registrations in 2024, which is up 44% because, well, they're giving Canadians thousands of dollars of a tax break on these vehicles, incentivizing it. This data here was just released, you can see, at the end of last year in October. Simply put, about 95% of vehicles bought are light duty in this category, but this is of new purchases. 2.8% of all vehicles on the road are EVs. Removing the big bump here for when the program was ending, 13% of Canadians back in Q1 2024 were buying EVs, and then that has dropped to about 9%. It's around 10% right now of light duty vehicles, of new vehicles sold. It's only 10%. This is an industry in Canada that has already been tried and has failed. And yet Mark Carney is doing the same thing again here. Up to $5,000 business or lease incentives coming for EVs.
A confident Canada, like a confident Martin Rea, a confident Canada, is making the strategic decisions and the generational investments today to build the affordable, enjoyable, and low emissions automobiles of the future.
They already did this. Just look at the timeline of this. Mark Carney joined Brookfield in August of 2020 as vice chair. And what happened after that? I have a timeline. I've already done all this work. Justin Trudeau brings in the carbon tax in 2019. August 2020, Mark Carney becomes advisor to Justin Trudeau through the Liberal Party. So then it doesn't break conflict of interest. It's just another loophole. On August 2020, he also joins Brookfield the exact same month. And what do we have immediately afterwards? Clean Fuel Standard. We've got 15 billion Canada Growth Fund, 8 billion Net Zero Accelerator, 4.2 billion Low Carbon Economy Fund, 3.8 billion Canada's Critical Minerals Strategy, 3.9 billion Zero Emissions Vehicles, 1.5 billion Clean Fuels Fund, 4.7 billion National Corridors Fund, 33.5 billion Green Infrastructure, 35 billion Infrastructure Fund, 2.6 billion Canada Innovation Corporation. We've got an emissions cap, and we've got all this nonsense here of them investing in 20 billion in Volkswagen, 7 billion Northvolt, 5 billion Stellantis, 15 billion Honda, 100 million Line Electric, 295 million Ford EV, 85 million in Dana TM4, 44 million in Goodyear, 1.2 billion in Eco Pro BM, 500 million GM Ingersoll, and finally investing in Nexstar, this 14.5 billion deal, and a 13.1 billion deal in PowerCo Canada. And this failed. This industry failed. How many more billions of dollars does taxpayers have to dish out before this nonsense goes away? If Canadians want to buy EVs, they can buy them. This shouldn't be forced on us. And I should clarify, of all these big projects, a lot of these didn't reach these maximum levels, like $5 billion Stellantis. They weren't able to reach these full subsidies, but I mean, this is what their plan was. All this investment and it failed. And as I've already broken this down, this is just for carbon credits. Carney, I don't think, is really making any money directly off the sales of EVs. He's not all heavily invested in the EV sector, but he needs this to push to the carbon credit industry here. Brookfield is heavily invested in this entire industry through multiple aspects, but really they're driving this down to a couple things. It's coming down to charging infrastructure, and then what goes through those power lines? Electricity. Brookfield is heavily invested in both of those things. And then Mark Carney's going to stick a carbon credit on it. And these carbon credits, they'll have a cost, just like you see on the food here. A sandwich, a wrap, whatever, it gets a carbon score. And if it's not low carbon enough, you have to pay the piper. And then the carbon credit system here that's set up, which Brookfield has already done with Stripe here, and Mark Carney investing in Stripe. Stripe created Frontier system. This is going to generate profits for Brookfield. That is all Mark Carney is doing here.
In the coming week, our government will unveil a new electricity strategy to double, I'll repeat, to double our grid capacity, to modernize our infrastructure and to deliver electricity that's more reliable, more efficient, crucially more affordable for Canadians.
More low carbon? Brookfield is heavily invested in all of this. Pick one, anyone. Evolugan, hydropower. Kokish River, hydropower. The biggest one is Westinghouse Nuclear Services, and that's what Mark Carney mentioned during the election.
Do we have to speed up the development of nuclear power?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And for a couple of reasons.
Across Quebec, in Ontario?
Yeah, we have uranium. We have big nuclear companies, including Westinghouse, Candu, and others.
As I've shown before, Westinghouse, a part of his Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1, the very same fund that he makes millions of dollars off of, depending on how well it does. So his Transition Global Fund 1, I have all the math broken down here over the different years. It's a 10-year fund. It has the option to be extended to 12 years. Brookfield, on average, gets around 15% minimum return year over year. And they can get upwards of 25%, and that's what all this math is calculated out here. 12 years, overperforming would give them $1.22 billion. It likely won't hit that. It'll probably be somewhere in the middle between $240 million and $1.2 billion. So what, $700 million Mark Carney's going to get off of pushing all this net zero nonsense on us? We're going to bankrupt our country, and he'll get rich.
This will enable Canadians to adopt low carbon technologies such as electric vehicles while supporting the electrification and growth of our industry with our deep talent. Thank you.
That's nothing to clap for. That doesn't help our economy.
With our deep talent, our research strengths, our innovation ecosystem, we can lead the development of the connected and autonomous technologies that will shape the future of transportation. We will prioritize diversification, including new opportunities that will be created by Canada's defense industrial strategy to strengthen the industry and its supply chain while leveraging our existing trade agreements around the world.
So I'm not sure exactly what he's talking about here. It seems like, is he going to try to push net zero through the defense spending? And that's why he increased the defense budget, because then he can push that through. Brookfield will get contracts. It'll also push everything to the carbon credit system. Is he just using all aspects to milk Canada dry here? Here he gets into the meat of it.
To support strategic investments by our company, we're dedicating $3 billion from the Strategic Response Fund and $100 million from the Regional Tariff Response Initiative. This is capital that will help our businesses respond to those trade disruptions, help them pivot their operations, retool plants to increase productivity, invest in advanced manufacturing, and expand into new markets.
So he's going to spend $3 billion of our money to help companies become more net zero, which directly benefits his own stocks, his own holdings, and his own Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1. Okay, yeah.
The new productivity super deduction will reduce Canada's marginal effective tax rate on investment to 13%. That's more than 4 percentage points lower than in the United States. To accelerate investment across the low-carbon mobility value chain, we're implementing the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credit, we're expanding the Clean Technology Manufacturing Investment Tax Credit, and we're including a wide range of critical minerals. And we are reducing the tax rate for zero-emission technology manufacturers so they benefit from 1/2 of the normal corporate tax rate, and that is before these deductions.
Look at all these measures going out to help this one industry that isn't thriving at all in Canada that people don't really care about, instead of focusing on bringing down the cost of food because Canadians can't afford to eat. 2.2 million Canadians go to a food bank every single month, and this is his priority. Canadians have to wake up. This guy is a full-blown charlatan. He's the biggest charlatan in Canadian history. Looking back at this chart here, all these people bought because the free thousands of dollars went away, so they quickly bought before. But I mean, just remove these 2 points and draw the line across. What do you get? We can make it big here. It went up slightly in the last quarter here, but the trend is going down right now. Either way, it's not a booming industry where it's going straight up to the moon and Canadians like, oh, give me the EVs. They don't work that well in our climate, and yet Carney's forcing this down our throats.
Canada will set a new, more ambitious, sovereign path to reduce automobile emissions. We'll drive down emissions by more than doubling the stringency of Canada's vehicle GHG standards by 2035, achieving the equivalent emissions reductions of a 75% EV adoption. We won't stop there. By leveraging new investments in EV production, consumer incentives, and charging infrastructure, we'll work towards achieving the equivalent of a 90% EV adoption rate by 2040.
Yeah, he wants that because Brookfield invests in that infrastructure. And ahead here, you're going to hear he's giving out billions of dollars of grants to companies to invest in this stuff. Well, who's going to get that money? It'll be Brookfield. And this all benefits his fund that he set up at Brookfield. Like, this has to be against the law.
The more stringent emission standards will enable the Government of Canada to repeal the electric vehicle accessibility standard, so-called EVAS. Replacing EVAS with those stronger vehicle emission standards focuses on the results that matter to Canadians, while avoiding placing undue burdens.
This doesn't matter to Canadians. That's the problem here. This is why last year I was saying if you want a vehicle, go out and get one before he does this nonsense. And here it is. Stricter regulations trying to phase out combustion engine vehicles. We should be able to choose, not be forced into something where he's going to make money from it.
This approach allows manufacturers to use a wide range of technologies to meet the standards and to respond to consumer preferences in the near term.
How does that help Canadians? How does that make things cheaper for us? It does not. He's not even addressing the problems here. This cannot resonate well with Canadians. Canadians who can't afford to eat, they're going to look at this guy talking about EVs and forcing all this stuff and grants and all this stuff. It doesn't help Canada. I don't think this is going to work well for him in the polls. This has already been a disaster with Trudeau. People know how many billions, roughly, they hear billions of dollars have been wasted, given to all these companies, subsidies, all this stuff. Stellantis running away down to America. This can't go well in the polls, but he needs this as a pillar for his net zero agenda.
The third way we will transform our auto sector is by becoming our own best customer.
You can't. These EVs have to be sold to America. That's how any of these companies survive up here. This is nonsense that we can just be our own best customer and we can give ourselves more than they can ever take away. All this nonsense.
That's why our government is launching a new $2.3 billion electric vehicle affordability program. Canadians who purchase or lease a battery electric or fuel cell electric vehicle will receive up to $5,000 and up to $2,500 for plug-in hybrids priced up to $50,000. To support the Canadian auto industry, this $50,000 cap will not apply to Canadian-made EVs or Canadian-made plug-in hybrid. And those incentives will only apply to vehicles produced in countries with whom Canada has a free trade agreement.
This guy's insane if he thinks the average Canadian has 50 grand to go drop on an EV. They can't afford food. People are literally living in tents in every single city in Canada now because of the Liberals and this whole nonsense. He came in, became Justin Trudeau's advisor, and then suddenly all this crap happened. This guy's been the biggest disaster in Canadian history.
We're also going to make it easier and more convenient for Canadians to charge their EVs, because too many Canadians worry about being able to reliably get charging on journeys, especially in rural and northern communities. To help fix that, we're developing a new national charging infrastructure.
Of course he is, because that's what Brookfield's invested in. Come on. Just look where the grants and the subsidies are going to go. We're going to look back a few months from now and we're going to see exactly where that money is flowed.
New strategy, $1.5 billion of investment through the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. So wherever you live in Canada, charging your vehicle should become as simple as filling your gas tank.
At a Brookfield charging station. We got it. And then Brookfield produces all this clean, green electricity, making money off of that end of it. And then he puts in the carbon credit system and then making money off of that. And this all funnels into his Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1. I'm still filling out this list, but there's Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1. There's also Fund 2, and I've got space here for extra for Fund 1. Then there's also his Catalytic Transition Fund. But as far as we know, he only gets carried interest. He gets profits off of the success of the Fund 1. And out of that, we've got Westinghouse, which we already know, the nuclear company that is doing business, like $80 billion deal with Donald Trump in America. I haven't verified this one, but I believe it's in here. Deriva Energy, Brookfield acquired Duke Energy's, formerly Duke Energy, unregulated commercial renewables business for $2.8 billion. This includes vast wind and solar farms across the US that can generate carbon credits. I did a video back in December 26th talking about the carbon credit system in America. We'll play a clip from my own video here. Back about 10, 12 years ago, then Canada started mirroring America's regulations for vehicles. And today, car companies in Canada, if they don't sell enough EVs, which most of them probably are not because EV sales are tanking, they have to buy carbon credits from Tesla. And we had Andrew Scheer point this out a couple of months ago.
This brings me back to the credit system. The new electric vehicle availability standard now includes an early credit system to help makers comply by encouraging them to get more EVs on the market as early as possible and even next year, and to build more charging infrastructure.
A traditional manufacturer has to sell 20% of their vehicles as EVs, but the market simply doesn't want them. Let's say they only sell 10% of their sales as EVs. They have to go out and buy those credits from a company that sold more than 20%. So let's look at Tesla. 100% of the cars that they sell are electric. So that means in the first year, 80% of the cars they sell will generate extra money for Tesla because they can then sell these credits to traditional car companies. These credits aren't cheap because the government penalties for not making the sales or buying the credits is $20,000 per vehicle. So what do you think these credits are going to be worth? If the government's going to fine you $20,000 for not having the piece of paper, that's what the credits are going to be worth. Your new car sale will be subsidizing Elon Musk's Tesla at 20 grand a pop, right out of your pocket. Trust me, you are not mad enough about this.
As an early investor in Stripe created the Frontier program, the carbon credit system that is slowly being adopted in the tech world. Well, he's an investor back in the initial funding round in 2011, so he's making a ton of money off this. Mark Carney wants to get in on this. This doesn't help society at all. And as Andrew Scheer broke down, I mean, $20,000 per car with an EV mandate. Well, that's why all the auto industry was having a meltdown last year, because it was going to break all of their business models. So they got rid of it. Now they're just going to be forcing emission standards, basically forcing their vehicles to have less emissions. Well, if they can't change that at all, well, then what? They just can't sell them? Like, they're doing it in a different way. This is very nefarious what they're doing. They're going to kill our auto industry as it is and then try to force an EV auto industry and force all of this on us. These vehicles don't work well in the winter. The technology as it is today does not work well for Canadians. If they had another solution that was much better, people would adopt it. And I think Mark Carney wanted to push this out in America as well, and is probably pretty disappointed that Joe Biden didn't win, because there's numerous companies in here that operate in America. So like this one here, Duke Energy, to sell utility scale, etc., $2.8 billion deal, as we just talked about. I'll break down the Global Transition Fund one in another video. The ones I've got in here so far, there's 7 of them, but basically Carney himself put these in when he was in Brookfield into this fund. This is his fund that he profits off of, and these are all eco projects here. Westinghouse, Deriva Energy, Scout Clean Energy, Urban Grid, Standard Solar, Entropy, which is carbon capture, which I have over on the chart over here, Entropy Carbon Capture, and Avada Group, which is a brand new one out of India. Tim Hodgson just mentioned doing more deals with India, so I'll expand on this in another video, but I can see what they're doing here, and I've now labeled all of these, and I'm putting them on the chart here with BGTF, Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1. So Carney's final point here, he's talking about a credit system where he's going to leave tariffs at 0% for autos coming into Canada, but he'll add a credit on, I guess, essentially if it's not EV enough, if the emissions don't meet the standards, I'm guessing. He doesn't go into the details. I'm suspecting that's what he's talking about.
Tradable credit system that would reward companies that produce and invest in Canada. In short, companies that manufacture and invest here would earn credit, while companies seeking to sell vehicles in Canada without paying tariffs would be required to purchase those credits.
That's nothing to clap about. These people have no idea what's going on. I'm assuming he's talking about carbon credits here because he's pushing this new EV mandate. So jumping over to the question period, listen to this question, calling him out for not being a leader on environment issues.
Next question, prochaine question.
Good morning, Prime Minister Nisha Patel, CBC News. Along with cutting the EV mandate, you've cut the consumer carbon tax, weakened a commitment to the oil and gas emissions cap. You're exempting Alberta from clean energy regulations and abandoned a promise to plant 2 billion trees. Do you still consider yourself a leader on climate change?
Absolutely. I consider Canada a leader on climate change and on focusing on climate change results and solutions. So let me enumerate what we're doing, and there is more to come. Minister de Bruzen is here and working closely with the Minister, and her responsibilities is environment and climate change. Minister of Industry, myself, a host of industries are developing our climate change strategy, which will come out shortly. But let's be clear what we're doing. And I'm going to start with what we're talking about today. First is establishing, through a huge range of direct supports and tax incentives for the entire clean vehicle production chain, value chain, from critical mineral development, processing, battery infrastructure, through to tax incentives for clean manufacturing, and the manufacturing of low emission and EV vehicles. So all of that in place, the most competitive investment regime by a mile for the auto sector, in particular for fleets. So that's one. Number two, incentives for consumers to adopt EVs being put back in place. Number three, and a focus on the results in terms of the transition path of the industry. So we want emissions down. We're tightening by twofold our GHG emissions standards, and we're giving the industry the flexibility how they achieve that.
Why? Why would we do this? Doesn't help our country at all. Prove why. Once he can debunk this here, all of the world's carbon emissions with China 30.9%, America 13.5%, India 7.3%, where's Canada? 1.5%. Canada's EVs make up, what did I show, 2.8% of the total cars? If you take the amount of cars Canada has, and we're only 1.5%, well, I guess this is nothing. And even if all of us drove EVs or rode around on utopian unicorns, it wouldn't affect the climate at all. This doesn't do anything but make him money.
Whether through plug-in hybrids, EVs, more efficient ICE vehicles, there are multiple paths on this part as we ramp up our clean energy side. In addition,
Canadians don't care about this stuff. We've been looking at the polling data. This issue is near the bottom. So I don't know if this is going to resonate with Canadians. They might be wondering, why is this guy doing this? We have so many problems. Why would he focus on this? We've got Trump. We've got cost of food, cost of living, housing, crime. Why is he focusing on EVs? I don't think this is going to play out well for him. Trudeau's already been running this nonsense. This feels very Trudeau talking about all this stuff. It just brings up all that stank, that waft of Justin Trudeau.
Was this new greenhouse gas emissions standard system modeled with the impact it would have on the environment? And if it hadn't been, did it get rolled out without that?
No, it was modeled with it. So I'll give you a sense. We are more than doubling on effect this standard. So we're moving from on a greenhouse gas base is 172 grams per 172. Okay, confirmed. Grams per mile of driving to about 74 grams per mile. Okay, so it's a 57% reduction in the emissions as this ramps up.
As I showed you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're down here. And this 1.5% isn't our vehicles. This is everything. Most of this comes from industry, not from vehicles. There will not be a noticeable difference on planet Earth if we all started walking everywhere. Mark Carney doesn't love Canada.
For the vehicles in the country. So we look exactly at that. And what it does is it gives, during a transition period, it gives greater flexibility for the industry in terms.
I'm going to be putting this stuff out into printable sheets that can be plastered on every single telephone pole in this country. A very simple infographic showing exactly what this charlatan is doing. He's been a disaster to our country. I'm going to point out something here very interesting. So the camera was cut in right here. There's no white people. I'm just going to say that except for this one guy who I think looks like that one guy from the auto industry. There's no white people in the frame when they're zoomed in. They zoom out and look, they're all on the side here. Is this just coincidence? I'm just saying. The only guy here, I'm pretty sure that's Brian Kingston. It looks like it. So I went through all the questions here. Most of them are just worthless questions. These journalists should be ashamed of themselves. Nobody's really asking him real questions about his conflicts of interest, the carried interest. All of this will directly benefit him financially. Not one question. It is so sad, the state of journalism in our country.